What's up, guys? It's Strategistmaster, and today I'm going to be covering my most requested topic, and that is the team building guide. And I'm actually really excited to get started on it. I've taken a ton of notes, so that way I do not miss the important details that I really want to talk about. And I'll be using one of my teams, primarily the Queen's Fort here, as an example. When it comes to team building, it's kind of like building a wall, right? You start from the bottom and build it up brick by brick. So, we'll just do that real quick, and we'll just say, to start off, info is power. The more information you have, the more knowledge you have about the game, its mechanics, the units, interactions between many units, skills, and whatnot, the stronger you'll be when it comes to playing against people, and overall the utilization of whatever team you managed to build in the first place. So first and foremost, I'll recommend that you familiarize yourself with the units and the meta, especially the meta. And I can admit that it's taken at least over a year before, I've gotten extremely good at the game, I would say. I guess in my own opinion, I'm trying to be a little bit humble here. I feel like I'm really good at the game, and that's primarily due in part to knowledge and experience. So, you start off with your overall team comp. You start off with, the framework. It doesn't have to be absolute, just start with something. So, as an example, I'll just use these guys here, because that was obviously the team I started with. And the rule of thumb is balance. Having one of each color. It doesn't even matter what weapon types they are, just, as decent balance as a good start to the team. Just pick any 4 units out of your roster, just one of each color, right? You could technically take any of them. And if you don't nearly have as many 5 stars as I have, because I've been playing since the game came out, start with all of your 5 stars first, and then kind of go from there if you don't have a 5 star of a certain color. 4 stars are still competitive. In fact, I've got a couple of 4-star merge projects right here. You can see my plus 10 Laszlo as a short and sweet example. Anyway, so once you got your framework here, you got your units of every color, you'll want to build each individual unit first. So obviously here I have Sanaki, and generally most of you guys are probably using budget type builds, not, the best fodder in the world, right? I'll be getting to that later. So just build your unit however you feel would be strongest. Focus on synergy, strengthening their strengths. Don't mind their weaknesses. That's what the teammates are for. We're building a team here, and your teammates can easily cover a very glaring weakness. For example, Sanaki here, she can't tank physical hits. Obviously, she cannot engage, generally speaking, again. Bow units, dagger units, she can't body block a sword, axe, or lance. It's very obvious that her strength lies in dueling mages, being an enemy phase unit. She's got low speed, very high attack. She's fantastic on the enemy phase for dealing with green mages, other red mages, and just stuff like that. Again, generally speaking. So once you build your unit, I've also obviously refined her weapon with the special ability. As you can see here, she gets, attack and resistance bond when she's within the range of a flying ally. And that goes into your, team synergy. Once you have your individual characters built, and like I said, just simply focus on synergy, strengthen the strengths, like Lucas here. He is a massive defense tank, so you want to, exemplify his power. You don't need to be focusing on buffing his speed in every way possible. Maybe, getting him into the 30+ category. He doesn't necessarily need that. Generally, you'll find that you do much better in the game if you make their already high stats even higher. And it's actually very satisfying to use them in this way too, in my opinion. So once you got your characters built, you can kind of, take a look at each one of them and see if they really do, synergize with each other. You could have a team, for example, of like maybe this Marth here. Let's see, Raven down there. Maybe even Oscar, and then maybe even Cordelia. All of those characters are like primarily player phase units, so they don't synergize as efficiently with each other as, like, say, maybe this team right here, because, Lucas here's an enemy phase unit. Actually, this is full of enemy phase units. Here's a better-ish one. Never mind. Okay, here we are. Here's a decent example. Effie, very clearly the enemy phase unit here. Celica's player phase, because generally they're not as good at tanking. They're better at initiating combat rather than having it initiated upon them first. That's what I mean. So, like, having an enemy phase unit, someone that you can put into the danger area to drag aggro and position the enemy units the way you want them to help give your player phase units space to do their dirty deeds. That's what I mean by all that. Okay, so back over here. Once you built your units up a bit, you've strengthened their strengths, now you need to take these units and synergize them with teammates, people who can cover their unit or weaknesses, use units in which that can exemplify their performance. Once they're built, find suitable teammates, cover the weak, cover the meta, cover, common threats, especially the meta. We see Reinhardt all the time. We see Brave Lynn all the time. Well, at least I do. So, just because of the fact that they're a common threat, you have to be able to deal with them efficiently, especially because of the fact that they are heavily their player phase heavily built. You have to be able to, counter. You just have to be able to deal with them in some sort of fashion. Even if it's, not even dealing with them on the enemy phase, just having a way of being able to initiate onto them without losing units. You want to maximize your arena points, basically. If at all possible, Fire Emblem. It's the entire, thing of the game is to not lose units. Because in the original game, if somebody dies, they're gone for good. You don't want that to happen. So, units have roles. Like, sure, we've got the weapon triangle and everything, but that is the basic mechanic of combat. The best teams, the strongest teams, can usually either take full advantage of the weapon triangle, or even break it. For example, Lucas here, he has very often tanked a bold fighter, Hector, or even initiated on a bold fighter or enemy, whatever, Hector. Green unit, normally lances are bad against axes, but his defense is so ridiculously high that you can actually break the weapon triangle in a small way and be able to take out units that would normally have a large advantage over, Lucas. So, I'm going to explain this team a little bit more. So you can see I've got my high-res unit. Obviously, she can't take any physical hits, so who synergizes pretty well with her? Lucas. Someone who can take a ton of physical hits, but nothing on magic, right? So that's actually kind of how I started this team in the first place, is by putting these two together. basically, one's a magic wall, one's a physical wall, right? And I put Camilla with Soniki, primarily because the final remaining weakness that the two of these shared was Brave Lynn and Reinhardt. Even though Soniki is a magic tank and gets ridiculously high resistance, once I've, done all of my spurs, hones, buffs, etc., because you can see Corrin over here, she still dies to Reinhardt, so I have to deal with the common/meta threat. And that's what Camilla's here for. She's got Triangle Adept. I know her build looks pretty weird, but especially with the floaty here, but that is, again, more synergy. Basically, I'm just letting things initiate on me on my ridiculously high bulk stat, whichever one is relevant in combat, and I'm using a ton of spurs, tons of buffs. I've got the Hamaya here, giving defense and resistance buffs. I've got the Rally here, and I even have this here. So he gives at least +8 to defense and resistance when he's within range. It's really satisfying. I love this team, all right? Well, anyway, getting back to the topic directly at hand here, you can see that I've given Corrin essentially his base kit, with the exception of Bowbreaker. And like I said, you need to be knowledgeable of the meta and the common threats, the common units that are used in Arena. And he's a fantastic Brave Lynn counter. As long as he doesn't get doubled, he's fantastic, which is why he's got Bowbreaker. I got my Brave Lynn counter, I've got my Reinhardt counter, and then these two are the superstars of the team. He's a physical wall, she's a magic wall. So that's pretty much what it's about. It sounds pretty simple, but it can be complicated when it comes to team synergy. But anyway, once you got like your team, your characters built up, and you're satisfied with how they work with each other, that's when you can focus on the C skills. Because for the most part, C skills are not important until you finalize your team. C skills are, I think every single one is made to support the rest of the team. There might be one or two that don't. I don't quite remember. But when you think about giving C skills to give to characters, you want to focus on what that character could and couldn't use. Here's a really good example here. Just take a quick look at Lucas's stats and just tell me, which of his stats is most useless, essentially. You're probably saying speed and resistance. Resistance is okay, but in my opinion, the one he uses the absolute least would be speed, which is why I've given him Hone Speed, so he can give the speed buff to other characters who can use it more efficiently than he can. Because, and you're gonna see that I immediately break, the advice I'm about to give, is you don't want to be stacking, hones and fortifies on multiple characters on your team, unless it is, like, super important. Because for the most part, what if I gave, for example, pretend New Year Corrin isn't here. What if I gave Camilla, fortified defense instead? So now, when Lucas is adjacent to both Camilla and Soniki, he'll get both a defense and an attack buff. Whereas if you stack the same, buff on multiple characters, now he's only going to get an attack buff. Slightly less efficient. But for this team, I've already got defense and resistance covered. He needs no speed. I figured that attack was more, important. Although I could also do like a spur or a drive. I just don't have those skills available yet, so this is what I've got. And you don't have to be, over the top efficient. I'm not saying that it's, bad to have, well, I kind of was actually saying it's bad to have, multiple, buffs stacked throughout the team, but it's slightly less efficient. So based on the team's needs, you could have any number of things infantry pulse, like if you're trying to get off your specials really quickly to get that immediate advantage at the beginning of the combat. You know, who needs what the most? And the big rule of thumb is to strengthen strengths. And, you know, this team is a perfect example of that because I'm doing that way beyond what, like, this defense is already really high, and I'm just pushing the envelope even further. With all the buffs added together, it comes right around to about 58, I believe. You know, all the supports, all the rally, the spurs, you know, ally support. It gets like 58, and I think if I put spur defense 1 here, he gets the 60 defense. It's ridiculous. But just keep all of that stuff in mind, and you should be perfectly fine. So I guess the footnotes to all this, I've got Grima here. There you are, Grima. As you can see, he's got close defense now. That actually came from my 5-star Joshua. That may trigger a bunch of you because, yes, he is a limited unit, and he's definitely a good unit. Me foddering him off does not mean I think he's a terrible unit. I really liked him, but, and this is probably going to be a controversial opinion, especially coming from a free-to-play player. I know, it's going to sound nuts. Just mentally prepare yourself real quick. But when it comes to the bench, you can see that I have a lot of 5-star units. And I've done my absolute best to use each and every single one that I can, with no duplicates, except for, you know, once in a while, the first one, because I need a bonus unit. I want to utilize everything I have as much as possible. And if I can't, you know, if there's no more room for more units, well then, you know, I need to find a place for them, because they're not doing me any good, or anyone else any good for that matter, just warming the bench. So, especially when it comes down to sword units, oh man, they are a dime a dozen. I have a lot of them, as you can see. And I had a lot more. You can see that Joshua's gone now. He fed Grima. I used to have a 5-star Athena. She fed Celica here. And I know that Sturdy Blow isn't the best. You know, in fact, I could have possibly foddered off Swift Sparrow from my minus speed era, which I may do in the near future. So, the bench doesn't do anybody any good. So, basically tips in regards to foddering, you know, high quality units, you know, rare units, rare skills, stuff like that, is just be very, very careful. I was very careful with Joshua. I know it may not look like it due to the fact he's gone and kind of leaves, you know, a Joshua-shaped hole, you know, in the barracks that everyone will miss dearly, especially Sharina. She's probably crying right now, but just be very careful. You know, I took a lot of time. I spent a lot of time with Grima using him with Fortress Defense. That's the one. Fortress Defense 3 for a while. And I decided that I really needed close defense. I needed something a little bit more efficient, a little bit more over the top on his A skill to use him more effectively, because he is a fantastic unit and I will be using him for a long time. However, Joshua hasn't been on a team for a long time. I don't see myself using him again for a very long time, especially with the competitive roster of sword units that I already have, especially normal Ike, the free Vanguard Ike, Arden, Xander, Zelgius, Black Knight. There are so many good red units. Red is extremely competitive. So if there's people that I can't see using in a long time, I just might have to fodder them off and use that skill more efficiently somewhere else. But don't get me wrong, to close out this video, I do want to say every character in the game can be good. They may be less efficient than other characters, but if you invest in them extremely fully, you know, every single step you invest in them, you know, attack, speed, defense, resistance, you know, I'll just say that there's a lot of YouTubers that believe Narcian is one of the best characters in the game. I believe that he's one of the best lance breaker fodders in the game. Wildly different opinions, but, you know, they're Narcians, or whatever character name you want to insert. They can be good. You just have to invest in them, utilize their strengths, or maybe they don't have any strengths. If they don't have any strengths, chances are they don't have any weaknesses either. It all kind of comes down to BST, skills, synergy, how you use them. Maybe it's a jack of all trades and you use them in everything ever. That could be pretty good. But that's kind of what I want you guys to take out of this guide. How to build a team, you know. Any unit can be good. You can basically make a team out of anything, really, as long as you put enough time and effort into it. So I guess I'm just going to finish on that. Thanks for watching, guys. Let me know if this helped you at all.